taken 2 courses in genetics, so I have enough knowledge to understand how much I don't know about the topic, but I have yet to come across the phrasing genetic entropy.
I did notice in the chat that somebody thought I was just referring to, the second law of thermodynamics. That type of entropy is in the universe. Is going from more order to disorder. I'm talking about genetic entropy on a biological level.
Okay, so if I have let's say if there's a human with 46 chromosomes, whatever, what would happen? Is it on a chromosomal level, or what specifically does genetic entropy entail?
So I guess the best way, and good question, best way I could explain it, it's pretty much just the genetic degeneration of living things. I mean, it's the systematic breakdown of the internal biological information systems, everything that makes life alive. But the thing is, there's genetic entropy on a personal level and on a population level, because why do we age?
Oh, because it's in essence, that's why we age. We have the telomeres at the ends of our chromosomes get shorter and shorter and shorter. And since telomerase is only active during a certain period of time in our life, they don't regenerate. So that's why we age.
Apparently,
our cells are mutating, right?
No, that's not.
Of course, we're accumulating.
Apparently, genetic entropy results from genetic mutations, which are typographical errors in the programming of life.
Yeah, because the mutation is,
Mutational systematically erode the information that encodes life's many essential functions.
So, okay, so there are...
looked at. That is not my belief. Let me just put that out there. I'm just reading something that needs...
Okay, let me ask you a question. Actually, who's the main guy I'm talking to? Midnight or something? Or
Drag. I'm not sure why.
Dragnot. What's a neutral mutation?
Okay, so a neutral mutation is a mutation that happens that actually doesn't have an impact on the actual gene. So if there is a particular gene that codes for, let's say, leucine, there's another mutation that can also happen that will code for leucine. So nothing will actually happen to the organism.
Yeah, so like neutral, it would mean like neither beneficial nor harmful.
Sure.
Maybe like a change in eye color, right? It's neutral.
No, that's not
harm or effect.
Not at all.
That's exactly
it's neither harmful. It's neither harmful nor beneficial. Change in the eye color.
So no, that the eye color actually has an adaptive quality to the organism, depending on what environment. So you couldn't say that mutation in and of itself is neutral or beneficial or whatever.
Well, I think that
it doesn't have an overall effect on the phenotype.
I don't think that there's. I think there's a mix-up here, right? Like, are we talking neutral with regards to fitness or neutral with regards to function? Because those are two different things.
Fitness.
Okay, because most often neutral mutation is described as a mutation that happens, as in a change in the DNA that does not change the amino acid structure, the sequence of the protein the gene codes for, and the overwhelming majority of mutations are of that type.
Now, can natural selection act on the near neutral mutation? Like, will it select it out, or is it unrecognizable to it?
According to the best theories of population genetics, it's generally assumed that neutral mutations don't get pruned by natural selection.
Correct.
Neutral.
Now, these near neutral mutations, they're going to spread throughout the entire population over time then, because they're going to accumulate in the genome. You're slowly losing a little bit of information every time. Because you just admitted natural selection is not going to select them out. They're unselectable.
But the thing is, they're not encoding any negative information.
If I get a little...
That's why I'm getting confused, because you're saying that they confer some type of negative impact, but if they're neutral, then why would they be conferring some type of negative effect on the organism?
Because if I use a car as an analogy, for example, obviously, I can select out, say the brakes need to be changed, new windshield wipers, okay, but rust builds up slowly. You're not going to notice it at first. And a little bit of rust on the door, it's not going to affect the overall fitness of the car, but over time, that car is going to degrade. And I'm sure
that's disanalogous from what we're talking about.
Guys.
Of course, it's not, because the rust is the neutral mutation.
Hold on. Wait. Sorry. Wait.
I got one quick.
Here, hold on. I'd like it. I want to kind of keep it one person and one person. And just
Yeah, it's
because
kind of like
for the
3 versus
audience,
1.
yeah, and I don't, I want to keep this fair. And it's,
I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and mute myself, and like since this is technically Sam's area, I'll let him go in on that.
all right.
Yeah,
Let's
but Dragonaut, I thought you were the one who wanted to talk about it.
I did, but there's someone else who honestly has years more of experience than I do. He's going to say the exact same thing that I'm going to say.
all right, let's do that.
And
Sam, you feel comfortable with that?
Before you do that, I just want a clear definition on this real quick. What is your definition here of, since we're relating this to natural selection, what is your definition of fittest?
All right. Answer that question and just go on. Then it will be Sam going, if that's cool.
Sam?
I mean, is it me that I'm supposed to answer? It was unclear who
No,
that addressed towards.
this was for standing because we're talking about natural selection here, and I need to understand. Okay, what is fittest? What is your definition of fittest?
As in survival of the fittest.
You're asking Sam.
He
No,
just
you.
said
No,
he's
I'm asking
answering
you.
No, we're trying to figure out when you're referring to the fitness of an organism. We're trying to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say if it's a neutral mutation, it's not that change. It's not going to have an effect on the overall fitness of the, like the phenotype. You're not going to see a noticeable change. It's not going to be a mutation that, you know, shows it's not going to.
We get that you believe that. That wasn't what his question was. I mean,
No.
he said it twice. Like, what do you mean by fitness when you say it?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, if I took every single dog, okay, on the earth right now, let's say I threw them into Alaska. Okay, natural selection over time, it's going to select the trait for obviously thick, long fur. Fitness-wise, what's going to be left? A population of huskies. That's it. Now take those dogs, that population of huskies, throw them into, say, the desert of Australia. What's going to happen over time? Now the trait, natural selection, what's it going to select? It's a selection process. It's selecting from pre-existing information. It's going to select the trait for short hair. What are you going to have over time? Probably a bunch of dingoes.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
skinny legs.
Can I paraphrase this because you're not answering the question?
I'm answering the question.
Assuming
That's
what you mean by I'm going to just answer it because this is just going to keep it a lot simpler rather than these weird analogies. By fitness, can we all agree that the definition is a more fit trait or a more fit individual? A more fit individual is going to be one that
exactly what I just said with the dog.
is going to be one that reproduces more, and its genetic information is more, and its genetic variants are more common in the next generation. I know you think you said that, but you didn't really vote.
I did say
I'm not
that
trying to say this to be mean.
Wait, we're gonna get.
You didn't really verbalize
Let's
it.
focus on.
But I'm showing you an example that people can understand. I
Okay.
don't need to go to Google and
Sure.
write definition of fitness.
Well,
I
okay.
didn't-
showed you a
I
real
didn't
life
Google
example.
it.
I think we should move on this because we're not going to get a definitive answer. Sam gave a much better answer, in my opinion, but let's move on. Otherwise, we're going to get bogged down in. Sorry, didn't mean to take over the Skylar. Sorry.
If we want to, we could discuss what a neutral mutation is, but I think that may lead us into more focus on detail when a more general picture might be better.
Sam, can I ask you a question? Do you agree that 99% of population geneticists do agree that we are degrading over time? I mean, we are degenerating based on this accumulation of mutations?
No.
Oh, you don't agree with that? Okay.
No, I don't. I've taken courses on algorithms in population genetics, and they don't really talk about genetic entropy or degrading. Like, that's not something that appears in the literature.
Well, actually, Sam, I've been dying to ask you this question based on our last conversation we had on the channel with Sock account. Let me use this analogy. Tell me if it's a false analogy, but I want to hear your answer. Like, if we look at the English language, okay, so it's made up of 26 letters. So if I have a book, that's going to be made up of information. How many typographical errors or misspellings will it take on that English book to turn it into, say, German, Korean? Because they're obviously different codes. How long would that take, and is it possible?
So what would be the number of changes per generation, let's say?
Yeah.
Sure. Is that possible to turn that English book into, say, something German based on mere typographical errors or misspellings?
If you're
if you
really
give it
interested
enough-
in this, the history, pardon me, Sam, if you're really interested in this, the history of the evolution of the Latinate languages and those derived from the Germanic speech patterns is quite well documented over the last 3,000 to 4,000 years, actually.
I've heard that analogy before, Ian, and the thing is that's a bad analogy because those languages evolved through intelligent means. For example, the word computer, that didn't exist 200 years ago. It exists now. A lot of intelligence would put into that. Now let me ask the question again. An English book made up of 26 letters, made up of information, specific information. How long is it going to take to turn that book through non-intelligent means, through typographical errors, to turn into a German, a Korean? It's something with a different code.
How many changes per gen? I mean, God damn it! If he asks me a question, I'm supposed to answer it.
Yeah, hold on. Go ahead, please.
Like, fucking hell. So how many changes per generation, right? Like, I've done. It's really funny that you mentioned this because I've written code that does this, and sure enough, like as long as you have an accurate dictionary and an accurate grammar checker, you can do that, right? Like if you, and granted, translation algorithms are not perfect because translation's not it's an art, it's not a science really. But I mean, provided enough generations and provided that there's a steady mutation function and a selection function, it's possible. I've written code that does it.
But is this something you can demonstrate, Sam, or is this something you believe?
No, I can demonstrate it. As like I said, if I had the proper parameters, I could write a simulation for it. Yeah, I've done it. Like I said, I mean, I don't know how to reiterate it. I've written these types of simulations before where I'll select a random sentence from a book, and then I'll start with, a random sentence of the same length, just completely random, as, generated by a random ASCII generator. And from those random ASCII characters, I can get that exact sentence. It literally doesn't take very much time, honestly.
Can I throw one comment in here?
Yeah, I just want to comment because I don't really think you gave me an answer. Like if I actually look at the DNA like an encyclopedia, right? The nucleotides, there's your letters. Grouping of nucleotides, there's your words. Genes, thousands of nucleotides, there's your chapters. And your chromosomes, thousands of genes, there's your volumes. Your sets of encyclopedia, that's your genome. But you're not demonstrating me how that book, that English book made up out of all that information, can turn into a German book or a Korean book, because all you're going to get is a variation of an English book and probably over time a degenerated copy of that original book.
Can I throw in one comment here? Just one comment.
Sure, Brian, I'll let you take the floor.
Sure, I just wanted to give one comment. We actually have examples of this, and they're called genetic algorithms. Probably some people in the chat know what a genetic algorithm is. It's an example. So you've got some really cool examples of this with like Seth Blang, who made a genetic algorithm with Mario. But it's basically using randomness to achieve a goal, and it works off of fitness. So, and that's exactly what he described. So we actually can model for you and show with simulation, randomness, and computing. So you ask about a book going from English to German. If German is the fitness, then what happens is, as you go through generation and generation of the algorithm, the mutations that go towards German are not thrown away because they're the fitness. Fitness is kind of a nebulous goal. So whatever is mutated towards German, it's passed down from generation to generation. And that's how you achieve a English book going to German from generation to generation with little changes, because the fitness goal would have to be German. But the fitness goal is always in flux for us. So we have examples of this. We know it works.
So Brian,
let me respond real quick. So those changes you're talking about, they're going to have to be obviously significant enough to create true novelties and innovations. So obviously just shuffling of this existing information, it's not going to produce a new genome or a new code from that English book. I mean, for example, E. coli, Lenski's E. coli experiment. Bacteria have very short generation times. They've been doing this experiment for years. How come they haven't gotten anything other than a bacteria? If we're going to see large-scale evolution, new information, an English code to a German code, why don't we see that? It's not.
That's not an expectation for things that leave their domains.
An English code to a German code.
May I?
Yeah, sure. I'll fuck off. It's fine.
Yeah, Sam, I don't want to step on your toes, man.
Well, no. I mean, like, listen, if we want it to just be a group discussion, he wanted a one-on-one. Like,
Yeah,
I'm kind of I'm just getting kind of confused by it. I'm not frustrated.
Yeah.
No, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to take
if I see populations of dogs producing other dogs, and then you say a population of dogs today came from a population of non-dogs long ago and far away, but yet you can't show me or provide me a mechanism of how that's possible, I'd be frustrated too, guys. Pawns come to people evolution. You can believe it all you want, but it's just not science. It's not observational, operational science.
Must be Google quick.
Oh, okay.
Fun, guys.
I'm just making. I'll be honest with you. I'm not kicking people for any particular reason. What I'm doing is I'm just trying to make the room smaller. Because when we get too many people in for the conversation, no one said anything bad or did anything wrong. But I've got to figure out ways to make this. When we have like too much of a group chat, it's not. I don't think it's entertaining for the people watching. So I just randomly picked a couple people to leave.
Oh, okay. I thought someone was sniping us. Okay.
No, you're good. No, that was me.
Okay.
Just those. I'm not. No offense, folks, that got kicked out of here.
Okay.
I still make clean a little bit more. Go ahead.
The issue here is that what Brian Stevens, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian Stevens, what you're talking about is something done by a person in bioinformatics, correct?
Well, no, it can be any. I mean, genetic algorithms are not. They're not bioinformatics. It's a basic type of computer science, algorithm. And I had literally said, like, the thing that is strange regarding standing is I've said that I've actually implemented these things just on a lark to see if I could go from random strings to English sentences. And lo and behold, you can do that. It's not actually terrifically hard as long as you have a reasonably good English dictionary, and a fitness function for changing letters. Like, I made it more and less complex, right? And different fitness functions, and it's honestly not that hard, right? It's just a matter of a reliable mutation rate and enough generation time. Like, I don't know why he's imbuing that there needs to be intentional changes there, because I've seen it where, through my own code where it's not intentional changes.
Because obviously you're appealing to time. Let me ask you a question. If I told you Mary Poppins could fly rapidly through the air with her umbrella, would you say that's kind of silly?
I don't know what that has to do with what I just said.
What if I told you Mary Poppins could fly slowly through the air with her umbrella? Does that make it more believable now? Does that make it more science?
Are you appealing to personal credulity, or are we talking about like science?
I recall that question being directed to me, but I'll jump in here because, like, I don't know. Maybe I was raised with manners, and maybe I don't owe you $146. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm fucking with Drag. It's an inside joke. But look, I don't. Can we, as just a point of discussion, can we try to stay to like one topic at a time? Because I'm having a hard time following what Standing is saying. I don't know if I'm the only one.
Well, my whole point is that everything we see, these changes we see, it does point to genetic entropy. I mean, we see the degradation. We see this accumulation of mutations. You're never going to get an English book turning into a German book. It's a different code. You're just going to get more messed up copy of that English book. You
can say that, but I can practically implement something that empirically proves you're false, right? Like, if there's not enough, I mean, and I've done it before. It's not hard code. Genetic algorithms are, it gets complex with what's your mutation function and what's your fitness function, right? Like, and I'll completely grant, it's a matter of
time.
It's a matter. No, not time. Like, again, like, this is stuff that takes instances because, well, computers can do generations really fast, right? And there's certain disanalogies in there. But, it's about the number of generations given your constraints when it comes to fitness versus where it comes to the mutation function, right? So if you have more mutation and more harsh fitness, then it's going to happen faster. If it's not quite that way, it's going to happen slower,
But the question is, Sam, are there limits? For example, like bacteria, they have short generation times. Can you get a bacteria as big as a whale? Because we do know there's animals out there as big as a whale, like a whale. So are there limits, or can you get that, through enough change, through enough processes and through enough time?
It depends on the organism and their evolutionary trajectory, right? With extant bacteria, they do not possess what we understand to be the requirements for something to be a large multicellular organism, right? Because at the divergent point, you know, what was it, roughly 1 billion years ago for eukaryotes, there were different traits, you know, and then you talk about multicellularity, which is even.
Is that from colonies? From single cell to multi-cell? Was that through like you know, colonies like sponges and things like is that the explanation? Or
I think the accepted one is that something like choanoflagellates, which are like obligate colonial organisms.
Sure.
So that something like that is probably what it was. But
would you agree?
Evolutionary biology is not necessarily my area, so I can't comment on what the active consensus is.
Would you agree at one point there was a single-celled organism, and then given 1 billion years or whatever, then we have obviously whales, all different types of life? So if there are limits, if we can't get a bacteria as big as a whale, we do know whales exist, then how can large-scale molecules to man, bacteria to biologist type evolution be true? And how can it even be scientific?
I mean, I don't know why you would need to have a whale-sized bacteria to have, you know, a whale-sized whale. Like, I don't know how that really, like, that doesn't
produce bacteria.
I didn't interrupt you.
Go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
I was in the middle of the sentence, and like, I understand that, like, you have your mind convinced. I'm trying to, you know, remain calm, not step on your toes. But, you know, maybe I can learn from you. You can learn from me. Is that cool?
Yeah, as long as I'll let you talk as long as you want, but as long as I get equal time to respond, then I'm fine with that.
I'm not interrupting you, but like one of the things that I'm requesting is that like we stick to certain lines because we're kind of jumping all over the place, and I don't know, you know, that's my perception here, so I'd prefer that. But as far as I don't think that your reasoning follows, right? Because these things are matters of historical contingency and selective pressures, right? There are not selective pressures towards bacteria to become the size of whales.
Is that it?
Yeah.
See, I agree that obviously genomes are not, you know, static. We can see change, but how come every time, because I think this all, you know, goes back to the limits argument, how come every time I see evolutionists, you know, cite examples of, say, new information, new novel information, they're almost invariably citing evidence, obviously, of new traits. I exist that, but these traits are always caused by the, you know, the corruption of existing information. Like, for example, the big ones that I find, Sam, and I'm almost done. I'll let you respond equally. You know, I see adaptive immunity. You know, examples of that. That would be changes in the order of certain, you know, sets of genes. Or sickle cell anemia, we might, you know, be able to agree to this, but, you know, it confers a resistance to the malaria parasite, but it's really just producing deformed hemoglobin molecules, right? So, I mean, that's still a corruption of existing information. So that's, I'm giving you examples because I figured your follow-up question would be, what do you mean by that? Another thing I see is aerobic citrate digestion by bacteria. I think that's with the E. coli experiment. If you actually look at that, that involves the loss of control of the normal anaerobic citrate digestion. So that's still a corruption of the existing information. How are you going to get rich by losing money? How are you going to get that bacteria to turn to a whale through billions of years of evolutionary processes?
Well, I think the issue here is that you, and I'm not saying this to be insulting, but you have an extremely myopic view of what the literature actually says. There are examples of traits where you have, like actually a lot of examples of what's called neofunctionalization, where you have a gene duplication, that gene is subsequently mutated, and you have a gene with a new function. So a great example is snake venom. Like there was an ancient gene, I believe it's in the phospholipase C family, and it got duplicated, and it eventually got duplicated a few times and became the snake venom family proteins, right? That's just one example. Another example would be, you know, antifreeze proteins in in Arctic fish, eel pouts being
that's a big one. I've heard that.
These are all, these aren't losses of information. This is actually increase in information and an adaptive trait. So I think basing examples off of, you seem to be basing your stance off of examples that don't fit the trend, which is fine enough, but there are examples that do fit the trend.
If you actually look at the duplications, though, and I don't know if we can agree with this, they're just duplicating existing genetic information, and then the mutations, they're altering the existing genetic information, whether duplicated or original. Like if I give you a copy of a book, and then I give you another copy of that same book, and in that second copy, I take a marker and I start marking out some of the letters, making different changes. Now all I have is a messed up copy of the original book. So there's not really any novel and meaningful information, because the size of the genome, that doesn't really tell us how much information content is in the genome. So I see genetic or gene duplications. I don't see that as a very convincing mechanism for adding new novel information. So I think genetic entropy, I think that information degradation we see, I still think that applies. Sam, go ahead.
Well, we don't, the first thing that I would say is, like, you can't say we see. It's something that you and a couple of fringe creationists have posited. And I'm not saying that makes it wrong. That's not wrong by that, but I don't think that that's a we see thing. But here's my question. Do you think, and so I want a quick yes or no here, are snake venom genes, are those new information or not?
See, the thing is,
that's not a yes or a no.
No, I don't think it's new information, because it's a trait, a new trait.
Okay, yes. Okay, that was the no. Okay, got it. So if I was to take, and I've done this before, let's say I have a text file of random characters, and I duplicate that on my hard drive, does that take up more space? Is that more information on my hard drive, or the same?
Well, I told you the size of the genome is not a valid answer to the information content. So yeah, you have double the existing information, but it's nothing novel. There's nothing meaningful there. Go ahead.
And then if I was to subsequently mutate that text file so that it, let's say from a recipe for, I don't know, Clams Casino to a recipe for pot roast, would that be then something new?
Are we talking about like a point mutation, insertion, inversions?
We're talking about, we don't have to get into, look, we don't have to get into detail.
Okay, so just a mutation in general?
No, it doesn't, you don't have to say mutation. I'm not talking in the realm of biology here. I'm just saying, if I change that duplicated file into a file that maybe has some resemblances, but it's a whole new recipe, is that something that's new then?
No, because you're still acting upon that pre-existing information. So whether it's natural selection.
What is new then? What does actually, if we're going to talk in the realm of science, what by hypothesis would actually, if I was to take two genomes and put them, one is from the parental generation, the next is from the child generation. If I want to infer that child has new information, how would I test for that?
Would we agree that a population of bacteria has a totally different information system than a population of whales or dogs?
I don't think. Can we go back to what my question was?
Oh, I'm trying to answer. I want to see information that wasn't present in the genome, in the gene pool of a specific organism.
Right? What does that actually look like? Right? If I was to write code to analyze this, right? Let's say that I actually do this in my lab. We have a sequencer, right? I think on a live Hangout on Skylar's channel, I showed them the sequencer.
Yeah.
I'm not bullshitting here. If I was to take these two samples and I sequence them to adequate depth, and I have I have high confidence assembled sequences for the parental generation and the child generation, how would I detect new information versus existing information?
You'd have to demonstrate that that information or the new trait or whatever it was that arose is not due to, say, just the mere unscrambling of existing information, decompressing the information, because we do know that there's a lot of packed information in the genome, or even turning on and off of certain genes, because that's what we see in the E. coli experiment. So if you can demonstrate that this new information arose.
But I'm not asking that. I'm asking what would actually be the thing that I'm looking for. You've told me a bunch of things that I'm not looking for.
Exactly, and they've yet to demonstrate that.
No, that's not exactly. You continue to miss my point here. I'm asking you for what is your criteria scientifically for what is new information. You've told me what it isn't. But in science, we don't go with hypotheses of what it isn't, right? Like that's just a negative story. And moreover, you can't test what it isn't. You test what it is, right? Like if I was to justify this as a funding idea to the NIH, right? I had to write a grant. Well, what the heck am I looking for here? What is the actual test? What is the actual thing that is new information? Because it seems like you're using the word, but you don't actually have anything other than the catchphrase.
It would have to depend on which. So if we're looking at a point mutation, okay, we're going to have to see a net gain in the information, because a lot of times, even if it's a point mutation, you're just going to see overall loss of information. I want to see that English book. I want to see how that can turn into, say, something that's Chinese or German. And you know what?
I'm going to ask for the last time, and if you can't give me a direct answer here, I'm just going to kind of take that as a tacit concession. What is the actual thing that is new information? If I have generation A, generation B, right? Because I can describe what a gene duplication is. I can describe what a structural rearrangement is. I can describe I can describe in much better detail what a point mutation or an insertion and deletion, how those are specifically inferred, because those algorithms are much more simple. But when it comes to new information, like what's the gross conceptual level of what I'm looking for?
Well, I can tell you what you're not going to be looking. You know what? You're not going to be looking for just random
standing. Did I want to see not wait? I'm going to just as a point of order, just did I not say just earlier that I'm not interested in what I'm not looking for? I'm interested in what I am looking for.
Because I'm telling you that that's all they've found. So you don't know what you're looking for, because it's never been demonstrated that new novel information has been added to the genome. So
this isn't how we do science, right?
Of course, because science is...
okay, one of us works in a lab. One of us has actually published. Okay, so when we do science, right, there are theoretical things that are not necessarily known. So I'll give an example of something that a close colleague of mine happened to have discovered, right? So he happened to have discovered that when you have an inflammatory response, that there should be sequence elements that are bound such that it dictates the inflammatory response. Now, that is all immaterial, right? But no one knew this. No one knew what is called the ISRE, which is, I believe, an inflammatory stimulus response element. No one knew what that was. But he had a hypothesis. He said there would be these proteins that would bind at this thing. These proteins, we know by their mechanism, act in a sequence-specific way. So if we can take the binding signatures and compute their sequence preferences, then we can discover this theoretical thing known as an interferon response element. So even though we haven't seen it, we can theorize and find it. So I don't see why we can't do that with new information, other than you're not willing to embrace a rigorous definition of what you're talking about so that you can be intentionally vague.
See, the thing is, what we do see, and I'm not disagreeing that, mutations, whatever it is you want to use, obviously they can create new varieties of old genes, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to explain, through whatever processes that you're talking about, how the 4-dimensional genome with overlapping codes and chock full of information came about. And you know what? I don't think any example that you've presented or any of these lengthy, information that you've provided, I don't think that I think you've actually proven and demonstrated that there are
Thank
limits.
you for the non-answer.
Limits, and that's inconsistent with large scale evolution. I will tell you this: I would like to have more of a lengthy conversation with any of you. I am actually 19 minutes later than I was supposed to. I'll look more into the answer to your question, as in what can you show me that constitutes of new information, and then maybe we can go back and forth a little more. I think that would.
So can I say something here? Standing, you should not mention new information if you don't have a definition for it, because it makes it very difficult to have a conversation because you've made it a moving target. I still don't know what you mean by new information.
Well, I don't understand how you believe that, altering or changing the existing information is going to turn a bacteria to a whale over billions and billions of years, because they both have, very different.
Thank you for the non-answer.
Information.
Thank you for that non-answer.
No problem. Anyways, you guys have fun. I hope we do this again soon. I
just got back. Did he ever answer
that limits don't exist?
I didn't say that limits don't exist.
I just got back. Hold on, did you ever answer?
No, Drag, we can talk about it when he leaves. Standing, I think that one of your biggest issues here, and I'm going to be honest here, is that you are interpolating a lot into what I know and what I think, not based upon actually talking to me. And you are going to catchphrases into scripts, and it makes it difficult for us to have a conversation.
All right. So,
sure, awesome.
We need to just imagine, or standing, whatever your name. I'm looking at your picture of SpongeBob saying "just imagine." Standing, we should do a whole show one day. Do a whole conversation.
I like talking to you guys, and yeah, I'd love to come on especially if we schedule something where I know I have said 2 hours.
That's what I'm thinking. We'll do a conversation. We'll do a conversation video. You come on my channel. We'll have